The secret sauce is just continuing. Like, that's it. There is an unfair advantage to perseverance there. It'd be better to go high end, like ultra high end, absurd, or just go low end. I can think of like one current client relationship right now that accounts for about 50,000 customers. I'm generally an optimist. And I think I do have like a little bit of like short-term memory. Like, I'll just bounce from thing to thing and like I'll immediately forget.
Looky here, we have Matt Deseno on. Looky here. How happy are you, Matt? All the time. Every time I see you, you're always smiling, having a good time. I'm like, either he's, the happiest guy on the planet, or, I'm just missing out on something. But man, you must be having fun.
I got short-term, like it's a consequence. I'm generally an optimist. And I think I do have like a little bit of like short-term memory. Like, I'll just bounce from thing to thing and like I'll immediately forget. So that could be good or bad. So like I have a little bit of Dory syndrome going on there, where it's like something horrible could happen, or like, whatever, the kids, here's horrible in my life. Like, if you're changing a diaper and it explodes all over you and you're like coated in feces and you're like, I gotta wash that off. You walk to the next thing, you're like, man, I am just grateful that I'm not covered in, child poo right now. And so so sometimes it's just the relative contrast of those things. But yeah, I generally optimistic about life, and then also I quickly forget whatever just happened before this. So
good. Well, hopefully we won't quickly forget the questions I asked, but we'll start with one, right? So, which is, what is on your mind? What's going on through Matt's head right now?
On my mind. Well, if folks are new or we haven't been acquainted, I've been in like the business owner space since 2012. What is that? Almost 13 years. It'll be 13 years in February. And more than a decade into it, I'm almost about to have our third kid. And we've got, I can see behind you, if people are watching the video, you got some instruments. If people didn't know this about me, but I grew up playing instruments. This is one of my favorite shirts, and it says "Live Simply," and it's got a guitar with one string on it, which is comical to me because if you know, you're like, I don't know. It just resonated. But this is sort of like this is what's on my mind. It's a preoccupation. Is how can you maximize kind of like the enjoyment, satisfaction, contentment with the least amount of complexity? Because there is such a tension and a pull to overcomplicate, and there is something beautiful about the idea of like a single string guitar, and so that's what's on my mind right now. And so trying to, I say it this way, is I want to continue to play the game of business at as big of a level as I can while being famous in my own home. And so that's a constant challenge of constraints. How can I maximize that joy, that contentment, that impact, that satisfaction, while minimizing the complexity of the day-to-day?
That's awesome. And we're here in 2024. There's a lot of AI going on. We're now hitting the voice AI, which is kind of cool. What trends do you see? What do you see going on in your world? Because obviously you are pretty like out there with working in different environments with lots of people. I mean, we really didn't talk about your background as in, people who don't know you, or of course I know you, but you've supported a bazillion customers, and maybe just 2 seconds about what trends you see, and just give us 2 minutes about some of the things that you've done. So if somebody doesn't know you.
No, that's good. Yeah, we'll give a little context. So my background is actually development. We went in the agency space doing design and development, kind of morphed and evolved into the marketing because we just realized we were more utilitarian. Or not utilitarian, but we were a utility. Like, people came, they wanted it, but I was like, how do you extend the value of a customer? You need to help them grow. And so got into marketing in 2016. And then we realized we just evolved into this accidental, it's considered like a white label space. So providing for other providers. And so in that capacity for the last, since 2020, we have now gotten to serve almost 6,000 agencies. And if people aren't familiar with that concept, is like, it's digital service providers to another company. And so you got 5,000 to 6,000 folks that pay us on a monthly basis. And then that extends out to probably close to 80,000 end businesses. And that crosses a wide range of industries and product lines and services and all sort of stuff there. And so almost by accident, just had a huge insight into the impact there. And I said 80,000. I actually know that's an underestimate because I can think of like one current client relationship right now that accounts for about 50,000 customers. And so so we have some big accounts, a lot of like small, medium like accounts where you get, they're an agency that has anywhere from 50 to 1,000 customers. And this ranges all things from restaurants to chiropractors to digital course creators to med spa. Like there's just probably hundreds of industries now that we get to kind of see behind the scenes. So helpful context there is in terms of trends that I see it across the board. I would say it's majority US based in terms of who we serve. Technically it's global, but by and large, the majority is United States. And then the main application we're seeing is in the marketing front. Folks that are doing kind of like growth-oriented activities are trying to get more leads, to try and turn those leads into customers. And so that's more of what we see, less on the fulfillment side of it. So even if it's, a tax accounting firm, we see them trying to get more reviews on Google or trying to get more leads in the door, appointments booked. We see less of them in their trends of how they fulfill or take secure files, for tax filing purposes and stuff like that. And so with that context, the trends that we see in the marketing space, there's always this ebb and flow of innovation and regulation. And so this is helpful to understand. A lot of times an innovation will come out and it will grow in popularity because it's literally unregulated. Like it's never before existed. You think like the first time cars came out, like there was no seatbelt law because they were like, what? Like we didn't wear seatbelts on horses. So what, like no one even thought about seatbelts in this, automobile. And that happens in the marketing and especially the digital marketing space all the time. New innovation comes out, people push the boundaries of its effectiveness. Inevitably, someone starts to use it in sort of like a malicious way, or less collectively beneficial way. And so then regulation goes there to start to protect certain folks involved. And so we've seen this time and time again, right? This is email comes out, they're like, oh, phenomenal. And then they're like, okay, there's spamming laws. And this is this dance that goes on. And an advertisement comes out and they're like, oh, this is amazing. Reviews came out and they're like, we can show these reviews, which help, they make people think that we're good and maybe we are good. But, and then they're like, there's the, especially in the United States, laws about what you can say, what you can't say, what you can advertise. Even if someone else said it on your behalf, that doesn't mean it's legal. Because one customer could say, this was the best business ever, and I spent $1 with them, and the next day I got 10,000. If you advertise that could be considered false advertising because it's leading the consumer to believe that like everyone who spends $1 with you is going to make $10,000. So those sort of things happen all the time. So big trends that we're seeing right now is a restraint on a lot of COVID innovation. So you had a lot of businesses that were not as digital, forced digital in COVID. So in lockdown, to grow or to exist, they had to get more digital. More businesses had websites, more businesses went into digital marketing, more businesses discovered reviews and all these sort of things. And so now you're seeing more regulation come into that space. Namely, like you mentioned, voice. I actually don't think voice has had a piece of regulation there. Not as much as I'd say the foundation of being allowed to be a business using phone. So phone in general has had a big shift in regulation over the last year. We just saw a new extra layer of this called Authentication Plus drop literally this week. And so what this means, there's pros and cons. What it means is if you're a business who's done the work, you will actually continue to have effectiveness here. But it means you got to do a little bit more work on the front end. It's not as easy. It's not as Wild West as it used to be. So, pick old versions of this stuff. When the first SEO came around, search engines, you could literally put up a page that says I sell Apple iPhones, and you would rank on the first page of Google being like, oh, this must be the Apple iPhone store. And as they increased regulation, it became harder to rank. But the good news was, if you were actually Apple and you were actually the vendor, or you're an approved vendor, you would rank, or there was a way for you to rank and get that positive effect of good marketing. But if you were kind of like a scammer, it was harder for you to do that. So I just see more regulation coming in, a little bit of a rebound of innovation regulation there. I also think the interesting thing is the trend of consumer sentiment. There is a divide absolutely happening. And so this is super helpful to understand. It's painful from a socioeconomic perspective of someone who has a heart, but it's just a reality, is this is, I think, an Alex Hormozy quote, like, solve rich people problems and they'll make you one of them. And so it is becoming increasingly more and more so Death Valley to try and serve the middle, if that makes sense. If you are trying to be a middle value provider, it's just stupidity. So like, just think about this. If I'm a donut shop, it is better for you to be like, I'm going to double down on fancy, stupid donuts. I don't say stupid. I love donuts. Fancy donuts that you sell for $8 a pop and can go trending and viral on Instagram, than for you to try and be like, I'm the $2.50 donut, or I'm the $1.25 donut. That's like, it's the basic run-of-the-mill donut, and you're just like adjusting to inflation. You may as well lean into that high-end market, because you're still seeing actually those top-tier providers sell out. There are now people who are doing like cookie drops, high-end they're like $6, $7 per cookie or per donut. They're selling out. Meanwhile, the cookie provider or the donut provider or the bakery shop that's like, we just want to be a good value, bakery, they're starving in the middle, because you're either serving the absolute bottom of the barrel, which is like, you're seeing the opposite side of it. You're going to be a pizza joint, either be an insanely luscious pizza that is catering to influencers and people that are having a ton of disposable income right now, which that does exist. There are people in that zone, or cater to folks that are like tired and burnt out about the increase of price of everything, and then you're literally selling like $1 slices of pizza because you're using the cheapest cheese possible, the cheapest sauce possible, and you're finding a way to like deliver flavor, maybe in smaller portions or whatever it is, and you're just like, hey, we're $1 slices. But if you're trying to be a middle tier value provider right now, you're actually getting starved out. It'd be better to go high end, like ultra high end, absurd, or just go low end.
Well, and I wonder why people decide. I guess the messy middle here is, if you're a SaaS provider, and we all know that what that means is, you could do the low end 99, 199, hey, here's high level for your monthly fee. And I guess the question is where's the middle in there? And that's a good question. And I don't know. I beg to answer, is that the low end or is that the middle now?
That's a great question. I would say it's value is always a consideration of the person who's receiving it. Like, this is always the case there. But so consider who you're serving. So if you're a utility. So if you're using high level right now and that's who you're reselling for, I would say the same thing is true, but just consider who you're serving. So I would go after selling to the providers that have found the money, because the exact same utility is worth more to those providers. And so if I am a dentist shop that is like, I'm the dentist who literally serves wine before my appointment, that's a great dentist to serve. If you are the dentist who's still trying to run, or you're the dentist who's doing like, $39 first cleaning appointment, or they're using Groupons, that's also a great dentist to do. But the person who's sitting there is like, we're $1.49 for the cleaning, and there's no discount and there's no nothing, and we're kind of like, we got, it's just average run of the mill. What's like, think about your price or your value derived is actually more a consequence of who you're serving there. So it's more about being discerning about who you want to serve, less about your positioning. Although I would say, consider how you stack it. So on the software side of it, or on the utility side of it, it's a positioning. And I'd say this: the more you emphasize the service, the higher value it feels. The more you emphasize the software, the lower value it feels. And so how can you position more as like a service even though you're software? I would look at companies like Podium. They're really great models for this, because they have a sales force. And you're like, Podium does deals sometimes $40,000 a year. One, they're always annual contracts. So just decide, I only do annual contracts. Two, how do they do this? They cater to businesses that are growing. So you just start pricing to say like, hey, here's our price is per agent or per team member, or start to do pricing in that space and target customers in that space. So just don't go after solopreneurs. Solopreneurs are going to be a really difficult person to serve right now, because that means, by and large, they haven't been growing because they've kind of stagnated at their own capacity, and so it's it's not bad. Here's the hard thing when people hear me talk about this. You can make money doing any which way you want to do. And I say, go do you, have fun with it. But if someone's asking me like real hard truth, where do I see the growth happening right now? It is folks that are going after growing businesses. Those growing businesses tend to be a little bit more catering to a higher end service delivery. And that's how they're driving demand. And so there are franchises right now that are expanding.
Oh yeah.
Go after the expanding franchises. Don't go after the contracting franchises. So it's like we can get caught in our own minds where I get it, no doubt. By and large, the economy as a whole is feeling the pressure of it is not a rising tide lifting all ships. It is a dividing tide where certain ships are continuing to scale up and certain ships are just, circling around the drain. Like that's absolutely what's happening. And we saw it start last year. Like you saw a lot of big companies that took a lot of funding or seemed to get a lot of traction, run out of cash and die. And so I think in the last year, we had more companies that were valued at over $1 billion in the last 5 years disappear than ever before. So part of that is a consequence of 21, 22 high valuations going on there. But it's like when that happens, take notice. It's happening. And so then you want to rest on where are there massive innovation. And so if I was give someone just a little bit of a cheat code, look around in this, we see massive innovation right now in the weight loss space. So this would be in the med spa space. Things like Ozempic, these peptides that are helping people big spectrum, macro innovation. You're used to have plastic, liposuction, dieting and exercise, maybe there's certain surgical things there. And this is something that costs less and is more guaranteed and faster. You're oh my gosh, there's no question why this is a booming space there, because it's actually eating the lunch of plastic surgeons, right? So it's taking funds from other spaces there, but you'd be oh man, if you're a med spa right now offering these weight loss injections, they are printing money. And so if you can serve those folks, they're oh my gosh, we're going at a pace we can't contain right now. So if you find zones of innovation there, you'll be oh, weird. Everyone else was suffering in 2024, but these med spas are not. They're opening left, right, and center all over the place. And it's probably more of your other spaces that are struggling or just being forced to innovate, right? They're doing different things than they were maybe in years past.
Well, speaking of opportunity, you cover a lot of segments of ground. Beyond the niche, vertical niche of a particular industry, we play in the same space. We'll be in Dallas in a couple of days, right? And I guess my question is where do you see that, the spectrum of opportunity in that space? Because there's so many different pieces to this, right? There's the affiliate side, which is tremendous. There's the SaaS side, which we just talked about. There's the SMA, the social media agency or digital marketing agency. There's also supplying the picks and shovels to go high level with different services. There's also other software opportunities that are out there beyond, the traditional models. And what you're doing, and you're just you're supporting a lot of, the different variances here.
Yeah.
You're growing, or, you've done your stuff, and there's a lot to be said. What do you see beyond the vertical side in this space?
Oh man, I would fundamentally, you can find a way to create freedom in any sort of thing right there. Honestly, the challenge is consistency and boring work. I can't tell you how many folks have, how many alternatives have sprung up to everything that we've ever provided over the last 5 years. And then if I count the number of alternatives that have sprung up versus the number of alternatives that have continued, the secret sauce is just continuing. That's it. There is an unfair advantage to perseverance there. And so that's actually the strategy. The grass isn't greenest. Well, it's it's the grass is greenest where you water it. It's and where you keep watering it and just keep watering it. And sometimes there's different seasons and you go through winter, spring, and then summer, and then fall. And if you just keep on watering year after year after year, it's actually, the difficult thing is bouncing from opportunities. But I'll tell you right now, if I was truly honest, and I've seen so many aspects of this, biggest shift and dramatic change that I've seen from anybody, and I'd even say from us in terms of growth opportunities there, it is when you pair when you come along existing audiences and solve a problem there. And so I've only seen this in the in truly the SaaS space. And so let me give you an example. There was one guy that I know. He was in our insiders. He was like a freelancer. He understood high level very well. He was making like $20K a month doing this thing. He found somebody else that had a network. And this other network, think about this. There are so many people that are creating business owners. If you can be attached to the pipeline of people creating business owners, that's as top of the funnel as you can get. And so let's go, for example, I find somebody who's teaching people how to become bookkeepers. Every year, their business may have been, they sell a $1,000 course to 1,000 people. They make $1 million a year teaching people how to become bookkeepers. Those were 1,000 people that were not bookkeepers. And then this year, they're 1,000 new bookkeepers. And each one of those bookkeepers might open a bookkeeping practice, then do $50,000 to $100,000 a year. And they're essentially trading their 9 to 5 for the freedom and flexibility of entrepreneurship. But every year, they create 1,000 new bookkeepers. They came to that person who has been doing it for 6 or 7 years, who has 7,000 people in their network who are now and let's say half of them stayed on as bookkeepers or whatever it is. So that's 3,000 to 4,000 people who are, they're bookkeepers. They've got their freelance career doing bookkeeping. They would benefit from this thing. And overnight, I kid you not, because this person went to the person who had the audience, they created a 50-50 relationship there. This person went from making $20K a month to they were doing $500K a month, and their split was 50%. And their costs were you're talking like $5,000. It was like silly because it was like high level. It was the most insane acceleration of growth possible because you just paired up with someone who had the audience. It's that's the hard piece of it is have the audience. And when you own the tool, the package, the product, you can do a 50-50 affiliate relationship. If you try to go again, you're like, okay, now I only get 40%. And if I pass that, now I'm doing 20%. And can I tailor it so it feels like tailored to them? And then also they could just cut me out of this thing. Why would they even use me in this connection there? So I'm just saying, of folks that I've seen accelerate dramatically their opportunity, when you ask me the question of where's the biggest opportunity? You know how many folks teach people how to become some layer of an entrepreneur or business owner every year? Tons. Look at the stage of ClickFunnels, and you would see all these folks in industries that I never would have even imagined. They'd be oh, I teach people how to do snow clearing. And these people create legitimate solopreneur businesses where they clear out driveways, and they're people teaching them how to do this. Or I was just talking to somebody, they were doing, what was it? Was it a house cleaning business? It was an outsourced house cleaning business. And that was the thing. Every year they teach about 2,000 people how to have their house cleaning business. And and they do, they get great results of people who are now they're making a full-time income as a freelancer doing this thing. Could that person pay $100 per month to have a legitimate software that fills the gap? Yeah. And could you go from obscure, no one knows you, to get in with the right relationship that literally makes the handoff to thousands of customers in a day, in a month? Yeah, that is probably the biggest opportunity I've seen, where people have created 7-figure businesses with 7 figures of net free cash flow and enterprise value. You can't do that because you can make money anywhere, but you build up those other things. Those are not sellable assets. Those are not assets you fully control. And as much as I love, I'm an affiliate for lots of things. My story is I got burnt. I started off as an affiliate early on. I got traced out of an affiliate deal. I'll tell you, and I've been open with everybody about this. As soon as a company becomes big enough, the shareholders vote and they say, do we want to keep on paying our affiliates? And they collectively say, no, this is dumb. And I love high level, but I will, all of my affiliate commissions, that in 10 years, the affiliate program does not look like it does today. So if you were thinking I'm doing this is my retirement in 23 years, you're dreaming. Eventually the shareholders will say, should we keep paying these people based on work they did 5 years ago? And they're all going to say, no. And then you're going to be there wait a second, I thought this was forever and always. And they're no, the contract was as long as we want to. And as soon as the decision-making powers are there's enough people that are somebody's coming up with the idea where they're I have a great idea how to get a raise. Stop paying these people. And for me, it was with Shopify. And I had a significant chunk there, and they all voted, and they went public, and they said, stop paying the people that brought us folks in there. And they redid the deal. And who do they keep? They just They're going to change terms. It always happens. We've already seen it. And I love it. I'm not saying don't do it. Keep doing it. But just think of it like I've now been able to buy and sell a high-level SaaS brand completely. We just closed last month, about 6 weeks ago. And I'll tell you, like, I was a pure owner through the way. I had strategic input on going, but there was a pre-planted operator. This was a 7-figure sale. This was great, phenomenal financial output to me to like walk away from. And I could never do that with affiliate commissions, because if you try to go to market with affiliate commissions, it's like saying I'm selling my boat that's sinking. Like, everyone's like, wait, why? Like, this doesn't feel like there's certainty into the future. Whereas if you have an enterprise that has net free cash flow, like it generates cash in and of itself, the fulfillment engine to that, every company has a fulfillment engine, but they understand that the cash flow relationship is with customer and brand. Customers and brands change fulfillment engines all the time, right? Like if you're like, whatever, if I provide email support, like say that, and I change, like, oh, we used to use, whatever, Mailgun for the email, and now we use Salesforce for the email, or Twilio, I forget their thing. Like, no one cares. They're like, oh, that's just the utility you use to deliver on the promise here. However you keep on delivering it, I don't care about. But that's what I'd say. That's the biggest opportunity there.
Well, it's fascinating because that kind of is a network effect that you're talking about. And the deliverable of that is really relationship capital that you can leverage. And
Yep.
Those come in different types of flowers, right? And which is interesting because they bloom when they bloom. And if you happen to be at the right spot at the right time when there's a shift. And that's why I was saying, I think if you look back and we talk about the things that you just talked about, which is like, your number one thing on your mind is simplicity, is creating something simple, being in a simple life. And, one guitar string theory, which at the end of a night of performance, I might end up with that. Depending on how bombastic
you play.
Yeah, how much was left on stage. Sentiment-wise, I kind of like the fact that, you notified me of saying, hey, here's a trend, right? The trend isn't as much as what you think the trend would be from like a technology standpoint, but the trend is, where do you want to put your effort, right? The trend is, hey, you can go down there, but that's what you're going to get. So if you end up there, that's what you want. But if you were up here, you're solving bigger problems, which is a unique way to think about trending, which is that someone once told me, is that you can go after IBM or you can go after the shoe shine boy in the corner. You pick out which person you want to work with, because at the end, they're both going to take the same amount of effort to convince to do something.
That's the truth of it. And I think that's surprising to folks, is it's about the same amount of relational energy that's required to get those kind of commitments or get that know, like, and trust. And until you do it, sometimes it's accidental or serendipitous. And I'd say for me early on, that's what happened. Is I went to university. I did my undergrad at Pepperdine, and so I was just in Malibu. And so I just stayed in Malibu. And so I was just shoulder to shoulder surfing with people that had amazing national companies. And so that's how we got some of our first contracts. And so when you have that, you're like, oh my gosh, it just felt like I talked to the person who had a lot of money, and it wasn't like a more difficult conversation than I have to talk to somebody else who's like, like, oh, I just started a hot dog stand and this is like my last penny. And in some ways, like, the hot dog stand was like actually more relationally exhausting than the other person who's like, oh yeah, I got to like, here's my budget. Can you make it happen? And so you learn that, like, oh, to do a big deal or a small deal, it's not actually more complicated. It does require a little bit extra degree of intentionality. And it's kind of like, I relate so much of marketing to like the relationship side of it, which is, most of us, our biggest experience is romantically. And you'd be like, if you posted an ad on Craigslist of like looking for a date, like what kind of folks would you get? Versus the extra kind of intentionality that could go into like, I'm going to put myself in a community or like in a zone where I know there's common interest or whatever it is. And so we're familiar with that on like the human or the relation or the romantic side of developing a relationship. But the same thing could be true on the business side of it. And so if you put yourself in a room or in a context where you're more likely to rub shoulders with folks that you want to rub shoulders with, the actual conversations that happen or the amount of like relational capital or energy that goes into like solidifying the deal, they're not dramatically different, but like they are very different in terms of output.
Yeah, and that led us to the next summary of what this really comes down to, and what you said the real opportunity is perseverance, which is, it really doesn't matter, right? You could be in a room full of really good people and you could get a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
But you could execute to a certain length and then give up, or you could execute to a certain counterweight of giving them the things that they want, but didn't maybe continue on down the path where it became boring, or it became, to some extent, maybe not the thing that was the bright, shiny object at the beginning, and became sort of like the, let's just call it the cog and wheel factor, and then you fell through on your commitment. Yeah. And I think that's a very valid point, because with coaching I'm doing, seeing clients, whether they're agencies or coaching clients that are up in the space of multi 9-figure businesses, it's very much parallel. The pieces are very dependent on whether or not the exhaustion of the flame is there or not, and those things come to a head when you start to get into production and scaling, and those things really make a difference because that has to be there. So Matt, I mean, we've talked for a good half an hour here. People who maybe want to get to know you better, want to understand your business, what you're doing today, get in touch with you, or even know more about the products that you're supporting now. And you've had such a public, for at least for me, and maybe some people who are watching this who are in the marketing, you've had such a public output because you do a lot of material, or you've been in this space and you've been prolific. Maybe give people where you want them to go to learn more, or to be involved with maybe some things, projects that you're working on now.
Yeah, I love it. I actually think the best place right now is Instagram. For me, this is where I tell folks a lot of times the challenge is, I need to be omnipresent, so show up all over the place. So you find vehicles of leverage to do that, and it's a combination of people, process, and technology. And I like to just tell people the secret is, people ultimately, you pick one channel that you kind of prefer, and that's the one that's hey, this is mine, this will be the real me. Instagram's that. So if you want the real me, stories of behind the scenes stuff, also if you're I want to get a hold of Matt, DM me on Instagram. I like to just be fully honest. That's a channel I own, I control, I run. And it's also interesting because if I'm always curious. I'm a total open book. If you have questions about anything, you can find me over there. There's a number of brands that we now hold. But the biggest thing for me is I had a goal when I became a parent. I was when I became a father, I wanted to, I had this limiting belief. I had this limiting belief that if I ever ran out of money, I'd become the worst version of my dad. And so I was that was a big dragon in my mind. And so you build huge walls, or as I say, the bigger the bear, the faster you ran. And I ran super fast and hard. And so I took a lot of the digital money that I made and pushed it into residential real estate. So people don't know, but it's I cash flow my life on residential real estate. I'm not suggesting that as that's a big opportunity, but this is the risk aversion in me. So it's this weird thing now where it's the game that I play digitally or in the business, it really is, it really is a challenge of personal growth. I think I've heard people say this, if you want to grow personally, become an entrepreneur, because it forces you at every level to become find areas of character defects, personality immaturities, whatever it is, areas you didn't even realize you needed to grow in. And you're faced with do I grow? Do I not grow? And so I'm absolutely committed to the pursuit of growth for the rest of my life. But I feel very much so privileged to be in a position of I really can be very, I call it abundance mindset, because I'm not feigning it. So I really am open. Anything you need. It's been really cool because even I mentioned those folks that have sprung up and created alternatives. I feel glad that I've been able to support them in that, because I know the challenge is keep persevering. I also know the marketplace is so big. So no matter where you're at, what you're trying to do, if you have questions I'm grateful that I get to be, I'm grateful that I've made decisions in my life that make it a little bit easier to be truly just an open book about anything that people are going through. And so I'm happy to be a resource, and Instagram's the place. If you DM me on like Twitter or Threads or even Facebook, sometimes it's may or may not be me, but Instagram, find me over there, and you'll get Matt Deseno.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for jumping into the podcast. That, to me, again, one of the standout guys in the agency / go high level / whatever you're going to be doing next / world, because you're affectionately known as just someone who's a very, very positive energy person. So thank you for being on the podcast. I'm excited to see where you end up next, and I will see you probably in about a day and a half or 2 days.
Hang out in person in a couple days. Yeah, looking forward to it, and thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome.